Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar. Today, glad you could join us. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak. I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator. Today's topic is post-award contract administration for government contractors, and it is led by Keisha Foster, who is the founder of Key to Life Professional Services, LLC. We'll get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Keisha your questions by typing them in the chat box on your screen. We will try to get through as many of your questions as possible. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to you on our YouTube channel. And of course, a copy of the slides and handouts will be emailed to you afterwards. For those of you who are not familiar with the Maryland Apex Accelerator, it is our mission to help Maryland businesses fully compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. So if you think you need assistance, please register on our website, marylandapex.org. Okay, well, that's enough from me. Over to you, Keisha.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back again to another training. All right, and so let's just get started. All right, I'm your instructor. Been doing government contracting for over 22 years in the government sector. I'm a GovCon coach, a former contracting officer / specialist, and a former Apex Accelerator counselor. And now you're instructor, I apologize, and then retired from the military. So I have a little breadth of information on, the different avenues and different views, so that way I can bring a lot of information to you. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube. I'll put everything in the chat for you. Not in the chat, in the notes section when you get the handouts at the end. So, because a lot of you like to reach out to me, well, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or anything, because that helps me to continue add to the training. Okay, let's keep going. And then, so right now we're going to start off with our quick poll. What aspects of contract administration do you find most challenging? While that's going on, I'm gonna so far we're looking like most of you are saying understanding, interpreting the contract terms and conditions. So we have the understanding, interpreting contract terms and conditions. We have the contracting officer representative, the COR, who monitors the performance and compliance, which we'll be covering today. Managing contract modifications and changes, closing out the contracts effectively. And most of you, I'm new to contract administration and unsure of where to start. And that I am so glad you are here today, because that is where we're going to cover everything on this poll. And the reason why we're taking the polls is to engage the audience, so that way I'm giving you what you need to be successful in the government contracting space. Okay. And so let me keep going. All right. And thank you for taking that poll. Okay, so now today's training goal. All right, so by the end of today's session, you will be able to understand the core responsibilities in post-award contract management. All right, so remember, this is part of the series, okay? So we started this series. I want to make sure I got my notes, because I want to make sure I'm giving you everything. All right. So we started the series with our proposal level 1 training. So once we did our proposal level 1, so we've been doing the messaging campaign development solicitation. That's the anchor for this today. So we had started with the intro, where we used the solicitations, scope of work, objectives to teach how to read the requirements. All right, so we did that in intro. That was in level 1. Then we did the proposal writing, where we looked at the evaluation factors, the submission instructions to teach you how to do the compliance, get your folder set up. And then we went to the next training, was the cost proposal. We developed our invoicing, our prices, so that way we could submit the proposal. And then now we submitted this proposal. Now we've won this proposal. So this is basically, okay, we won the proposal. Now what? Basically, that's what this training is for today. So if you've taken all of those trainings, you're right. But if you haven't, then we have it on YouTube. So you can go back and watch the series, because we want you to see. Many times, the small business, especially when you're new, you don't know where to start. So and because of the limited time, we have to do it in blocks. So the first training was the level 1, then the second training was the level 2, then we went up, because it's so comprehensive. Okay. And then, so what we wanted to do today, we're focusing on the FAR part 42 and 43, which I'll be going over there too for you, so we can go over everything together. And so that way you have a series of how everything takes, and then what is involved in each portion of that. So that was why we did it the way we did it. So that way we could really take our times and go over there, everything for you. And then to prepare for successful contract closeout, because that's the most important thing. So that way, it's the life cycle. So we start from the opportunity, we've identified the opportunity, all the way to closeout. And that's for this today's training goal. Okay, because the post award phase begins the moment the contract is signed. So contract administration happens with this phase. It's structured management of performance, compliance, and reporting according to the FAR. So we talked about that, the FAR. And then while the contracting officer holds oversight and authority, the contractor is responsible for executing deliverables, maintaining documentation, and communication. And we're going to go over everything in the slides. And you will definitely be getting a copy of the slides, the handouts, everything at the end of this training, because I want to make sure you're set up for success. So we try to make sure we have you the handouts, the training slides at the end of the training. Okay, so let's keep going. All right. All right, so our agenda. Okay, so we have a lot to cover in this agenda, because we got to clarify some things. And the way I do it is so that way when you go back at the end of this training, pull out. Remember, you have to take notes. Take notes, so when you get in that session, you know, okay, I had questions on slide 1, or I had questions on slide 3. And, so that way, once you get the slides, you just add your notes, and then you have it in your content library for later. So if that question comes up again, you just refer back to your agenda, and you see what page it was on or what slide it was on. And like I said earlier, I have put all of the notes inside. So once you get these, I have notes also in there. So that's why you said, well, you want to combine your notes with my notes, so that way you always have that repository. So if you have somebody else working it, your BD or your business development person, or maybe you might have your you might have your BD or your virtual assistant, your capture management, is those different things we covered in the training before. Okay, so clarifying the concept, the conceptual confusion on the contract admin. Then we got to talk about the the overhaul. We already know what's going on. They're changing a lot of things. So although we're still going to use the FAR, but also please make sure you sign up for the FAR notifications. And we're going to cover that as well. Then I'm going to introduce you to contract admin. We're going to talk about the post award, the responsibilities, contract modifications, the performance monitoring, reporting, and because it's a lot involved. It's a lot involved into contract administration, your documentation, record keeping, invoicing and payments, and then the contract closeout, and then counseling prep. I'm always trying to teach you how to be prepared for your sessions because it takes so much time sometimes because we service the whole state of Maryland. So sometimes it's very challenging to get in, but that's why we've having this training to prepare you. So while you're waiting for your session or waiting to be assigned a counselor, you can hit the ground running with this training. And then we always have the slide for the more training to help you grow, questions, and additional resources. Now, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I always take a break so I can make sure there's no questions. I check the chat, but I keep it close so as not to keep myself distracted. And that way I don't keep getting the notifications. So if you put the questions in the chat, we will get to them as soon as we can. And I always take breaks so that way you can get your questions answered. Okay, but I just don't keep it open because I don't want to get distracted when I'm trying to because you know how it's just like a text message. You get a text message, you got to stop and read the text message. I don't have time. Okay, so now clarifying, right? Why is it confusing? Okay, the government manages oversight and compliance, right? The contractor manages the performance, reporting, and communication. Too many times, we're trying to do the government contracting officer's job. Their job is oversight and compliance. The contractor's job, the government contractor's job, is to manage performance reporting and communication. Okay. If you do not manage the reporting and communication, there's going to be some issues. And that's one of the problems, because you'll go into the FAR, which I'm going to pull up right now, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and that's FAR subpart 42.3. And it lists an extensive responsibilities of the Contract Administration Office, the COA, and all of those internal but you got to remember, if we have a job to do, then you have a job to do. So you see, I put all the references here so that way you can always verify all this information that we're getting, because it's fast. Sometimes it's coming out like a waterfall. But our job is to make sure you get the information and then you have it, and then you can just keep going back and review it. So what I always do is we go to the Federal Acquisition Regulation. When I tell you, you go to the acquisition right here, FAR, you need to Google it. You just type in Google, you took FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation is going to pop up, because I'm always trying to tell you how to get there just in case you don't have the link or anything. So you can always Google it. Now, when we're talking about 42, so we're going to 42, all right? That's the contract administration. So when you hear me say the Federal Acquisition Regulation, I'm talking about this. This is what our regulation, what we follow as contracting professionals. We have to go by this. And then there's roles and responsibilities assigned to us, but there are also roles and responsibilities assigned to you. And when I said those, when you see I have the number listed on there for you, so if it was 42.302 A3, then you will go see how you will go right here, and you can see the subparts. You would just click on it and it'll take you to the responsibilities and those functions that I was discussing with you. And you'll see them right here. Perform the functions listed in, and they tell you. So these are the functions that we as the contracting professional will be performing. But you have to know what you need to give us as the contract once you win the award. So that's why we're going over this today. And you'll see when you go to the solicitation that we have been covering for this series, we've been talking about the messaging campaign development. everything we've already went through all that, so I won't be covering that in this training. So if you want to know more about this, then you have to go back and watch those series of trainings. But today we're talking about contract. We've won the contract. Okay. And so when you're trying to do your contract administration, you have to set up your files a certain way, all that other thing, because you've won it now. So now we're talking about that portion. So it just tells you a list of those things, and this is the solicitation we're talking about, and we're going to cover some of these things, and I'll just go over it. So, and we've already went over all of this. So for today's training, so let me just open it up and we'll go over. So this is what I'm talking about. These are the different things we're going to talk about today when we get to that in the slides. But I'll always give you a preview so you can be prepared and understand what we're talking about today and why it's important to you to understand these different things. Because if you take your time out, because it's a lot involved. You take your time out, you read, you highlight if you need to print it out, and you just go over the things, but you're looking for the things that you, as the contractor or the contracting professional, okay, not the stuff that they're doing, but they're everything you do, there's a reciprocal. You have to do something, you have to do something, your portion. So that's why I always try to tell them, I say, yes, you can go here and you can see certain things, but it's sometimes it's not as clear as cut. Okay, what part do I play? And that's what this training is teaching you today. What part do you play? And then they're just letting you know these are the functions. So you see, so you'll understand what I mean when I say the contracting officer, right here, it'll tell you functions. The contracting officer normally delegates the following contract administration functions to a contracting office, the administration office. And but they don't have to. And these are the things that they're going to be reviewing. So it's important that they're going to be reviewing your contractor's compensation structure. They're going to look at your insurance plans. They're going to look at how you conduct, to conduct a post-award orientation conferences. This is the stuff they're going to be looking. So that's why I always tell you, so that way you're not alarmed at what they're going to want to see now that you've won this contract, because the other things you've already completed that, you got a thing, but you want to win another contract. And how you do that is to be prepared, know what they're going to be asking for, know how they're going to be looking at your information. They're going to be assigning you a contracting officer. Those are different roles and responsibilities we're going to discuss as we continue this training today. All right. So then why I say this, because highlighting your role for the post-award management is important. And like I said, why is it important for contractors to know? Because you need to know what part you play. So let's keep going on with the slides. Okay, and then I'll jump back to this. But so that way, when I reference the federal acquisition regulation, because so many of you are new today in this training, and I want you to understand when I say the federal acquisition rate, this is what I'm referring to. Okay, this is what I'm referring to. All right, so let's keep going with the slides. Okay, so we talked about the list, the conduct post-award orientation conferences. Those are some of the things that you need to make sure you're aware of, because that's something you have to do. And then ensure the contractor compliance with the contractual quality assurance requirements. So if this one has a quality assurance requirement, then you make sure you have that set up. But that should be internal in your business always, because you always have to manage it. You will, every contract you have, even if it's not written in the contract, you still will have to manage that contract, and you need to have a plan set up. All right, let's keep going. All right, so now the revolutionary FAR overhaul that I was telling you about, what it means for contractors. Okay, so this is a government-wide initiative it's supposed to be to simplify and modernize the federal acquisition regulation. It's supposed to also add the buying guide. So the guides to really help you and assist you with your government contracting, because sometimes when you're reading all that, you see it's a lot. And so the buying guides are supposed to help streamline that. And then the focus is on the legal and policy requirements supposed to be streamlined. And then it introduces the digital documentation and oversight. So like the PIE, the different systems that the government use, like the SAM.gov, the FPDS, all those different things like that. And then it reinforces the shared accountability. So that's another good thing about it. All it is to it's supposed to help you. Okay, so let me just pull it up because sometimes it can be very difficult. So let me pull that up. So right here on the you will see the FAR overhaul at the top of the screen. It will let you know on the acquisition.gov. Remember, we're still on that same page, and all you have to do is click on the FAR overhaul, and this is where it's going to give you the updated. This is where you're going to get your quick access to key RFO resources. This is what I was telling you about. They're coming up with the FAR companion access. All of these are the living resource guide, best practices, and practical advice for the buyers. But then you also have they're going to be updating a lot of the parts. So you need to be in here checking to see has they updated the FAR part, whichever one, if you fall under FAR part 13 or another thing, but you're still new to this. So it's going to take a little time, but just start getting familiar with these different resources that you're going to have to refer to, because they're important for you as a small business, because this is where and but also sign up for it too, because they're doing a lot of updates, and I don't know when the updates are going to be finished. And if you have questions, you see they have places for you to put questions, because although they're coming up, there is so many things has changed in the government space so far, and this just took a place because we have the new administration. So it's important that you sign up. Right here you see how you sign up for the FAR news or anything else, so you can stay updated, and then that way you always know what's going on. And then please make sure you check out the frequently asked questions, because you see how they're breaking everything down for you, giving you the information like what is the purpose of it, and then you just click on it and it's going to tell you. And that's the reason why I always make sure I put this in the training for you, so that way if you got confused on something while we were going through the training, then you can go back and reference this later. And that's why it's important that I go through each one with you, so you know why. And then just keep going through all of the frequently asked questions, and they'll tell you, because contracting has become so complex, this is a way for them trying to make it more understandable for the new small business just getting started. So please go in and review this, because this is going to really help you in the long run. So that's the FAR and regulation, and that's the FAR rehaul. That's the overhaul. I apologize. Okay. All right, so that's what I was talking about. And let me make sure I didn't have any more to talk about for that. And just adapting your contract administration to this. Because of this focus, I think I put it in here twice, the slide in here twice. I apologize. I put it in here twice because I wanted to make sure you're adapting to the FAR. Okay, so let me just keep going. Okay, there we go. Introduction to contract that I misspelled that. That should be contract administration. I'll update the slide before I send out the new slides for today's training, because these are the new slides, because we gave this training last year, and we've seen a lot of things we wanted to add to this training, and it was good, but I want to make sure that everything is updated when you get the new slides. Okay, so now a contract is a legally binding agreement between two or more parties that establishes and enforceable obligations and right. In the context of government contracting, a contract is a written agreement between the government agency and a private entity, which is the contractor, for the purpose of goods, services, or construction. It is governed by specific laws, such as the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which we've been talking about in detail because so much has changed. I want to make sure you understand that you have to know about that Federal Acquisition Regulation. And it includes detailed terms and conditions that both parties must adhere to. Okay, now before I move on, I want to make sure I didn't have any questions before I start the exercises in a minute and going over the handouts. So I'm
Yes,
going to check this.
thanks,
Okay.
Akisha. Thanks, and
Mm-hmm.
welcome to everybody that joined us today. We do have one question. If
Okay.
you have to meet FAR 42 and 43 requirements,
Mm-hmm.
how does a startup position themselves to compete for work, or should they just focus on subcontracting?
Well, especially when you're brand new, I always recommend that you start on as subcontracting because as a prime contractor, because you are expected to know all of this. You understand what I'm saying? Because you're going to be expected to understand the terms and conditions that you're signing for. You're going to have to understand what is FAR Part 42, which all that is teaching you the contract administration, and FAR Part 43, which we're going to go over, is the modifications when they modify the contract. You see what I'm saying? So if those things you don't know how that goes, the unilateral, the bilateral, all those things, I always recommend you start off as a subcontractor because you'll learn all that from your prime contractor indirectly because you're going to have to do all that stuff for that prime contractor plus those flow down clauses that come to the small, the subcontractor. So that's why I always say you don't want to win a big contract and then you're going to be held to that standard because, oh, by the way, you're going to get a report card. They're going to grade you on how you performed on this contract, and then that will affect how you win new contracts. So we want to definitely make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to impede us winning our next contract. So that's why I always tell them, especially when you're brand new, you don't know what you don't know. So it's important that it may be advantageous to start as a subcontractor, but it's very hard even when you are going as a subcontractor because the prime contractor knows that they're responsible for you basically. So if you do something wrong, they're going to be held accountable for it. They're going to get their report card, that contracting performance assessment report, letting them know that, oh, we failed in this area. So they're going to be strict too. So it's good to start building those relationships with those prime contractors. So that way you know exactly. Okay. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Okay. So the next portion I wanted to talk about was, okay, so we talked about the contract administration. You understand that that's a legal binding contract. So then we need to go to the next step. Let's talk about, hold on, let me turn it. Okay, there we go. The post-award orientation overview. So when I tell you about these different things, that's the conducting of the post-award orientations. That's the assigning of the CORs. That's the contracting officer representative for ongoing the oversight and monitoring contract modifications. Now, this, like I told you before, we're going to go to the FAR. So when I say that, now we're going to go back to the regulations. We're going to go to the FAR. Okay, we're going to go back to 42. And then you're going to go to the contract. What we're doing right now, this was the, hold on, let me make sure I'm giving you the right information. We're doing the post-award orientation overview, and that's basically the contract administration. Okay, so let me go in here so I can show you what those different functions are. So you'll see it right here. That's the subpart 42.5. Now, I try to make sure I'm putting those FAR references on here so you can understand what all, because as I bullet points on here, so that way it's clean and neat for you to review. You need to go back and read. So that's one of your to-dos, is to read this to make sure you've captured everything. Because although I'm giving you the bullet points, you need to understand what it all entails. Okay, so what it is, prescribes policies and procedures for the post-award orientation of contractors and subcontractors, right? Through a conference or a letter or other form of written communication. So as you see, they can do it two ways, conference, and most of the times they want to meet you, talk to you, give you the expectations. It's just basically your meeting with them to go over the things that they discussed in the contract. So this is the reason why you get this. Let me go to that because I want to show you the notice. Okay, so there it is. The notice to proceed. So basically, after contract award and submission of acceptable insurance certificates and copies of all applicable license and permits, the contracting officer will issue a notification to begin work. So this is what we're talking about when I say that conference. Okay, so they sent you that notice, boom, when you're going to begin that work, and then a statement about the start will be included, minimum 10 days from date of contract award, unless the contractor agrees to an earlier date on which performance shall start. All right, so this is for this solicitation document only. It will say something different for another opportunity. They may say 20 days later. They may say 30 days later. Everything is subject to that solicitation. So if it's an RFP, or if that's a request for a proposal, or RFQ, this is an RFQ, request for quote. And normally a request for quote is the lowest price technically acceptable. That means they're looking for the lowest price. Okay, they're looking for the lowest price. So that's why I said this is what I'm talking about when I say this right here. This is what they're letting you know, that written communication, right? They didn't sent you that notice to proceed. Now this is how they're selecting contract for post-award orientation. Okay, so this is just giving you the nature. They said when deciding whether post-award orientation is necessary, and if so, what form it shall take, the contracting officer shall consider as a minimum, the following. So this is why I was telling you it's important that you learn the different terms and the terms that they're using, because if you win as a prime contractor, they're going to expect you to know this. These are some of the things they're going to expect you to know for a post-award orientation. So you see why I was very adamant about when you're getting started, I believe you need to get the training first, so you can set yourself up for success. Now, however, if you won that contract already, well, you have to learn on the job training. So just stay on top of it so that way you don't lose the contract, because I've seen them win the contract and then get that notice, that cure notice saying, hey, you need to fix this or we about to terminate your contract. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why it's important that we go over these things so you understand what's involved in these different things. They're just talking about the nature and extent of the pre-award survey and other prior discussions with the contractor. Okay, if the contract, they're talking about the type, value, complexity of the contract. If it's a complex buy, this one is not. This one is just a firm fixed price, if I'm not mistaken. When we went over it last time, the complexity, the history, they're just talking about these different things that they would discuss with you in this meeting. Okay, and sometimes they call it the kickoff meeting, all those different things of that nature. All right. So then they're telling you right here, the post award conference arrangements, the contracting officer who decides that a conference is needed is responsible for. They're going to establish the time and place of the conference, preparing the agenda when necessary, and then notifying appropriate government representatives. And that could be the contracting/contract administration office if that is assigned, and the contractor. So these are all the people designating or acting as the chairperson, conducting a preliminary meeting of government personnel, and so forth and so on. So that's why I always tell you, make sure you read these things, because it's good to know and not be blindsided. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I didn't know this was next, or I didn't know I had to do that, or I didn't know. And so what these trainings are designed for, to make you aware of all the different things or things that could happen once you win a contract award, and then making sure that you can keep that contract award. All right. So Then they're talking about the procedures. All right. Post award report. Okay. They're just telling you letters and circumstances, the post award subcontractor conferences. So sometimes the subcontractor think that they don't have a role to play. No, you have a role to play as well. So that's why it's important. That's why I take you to the regulations so you can understand just because you're a subcontractor, you get a part to play, and that's good. So you don't have the overwhelm of the entire contract. You're starting to learn the little things that you need to know. So for instance, the post award subcontractor conferences. Now, the prime contractor is generally responsible for conducting post award conferences with subcontractors. However, the prime contractor may invite government representatives to a conference with subcontractors as well, or the government may request that the prime contractor initiate a conference with subcontractors. Okay, and then the prime contractor should ensure the representatives from involved contract administration office are invited. So they may be there as well. So that's why I always tell you, just because you're a subcontractor, that doesn't mean anything. You could possibly be invited as well. So that way you want to be prepared and you want to have the training also. So that way you can navigate this thing. Okay, so let's go back to the slides because this is what I wanted you to make sure you understand and where the information is, because we don't want to miss anything because it's a lot to cover. All right, so let's see where we at next. Okay, the roles and responsibilities. We talked about you heard me talk about the contracting officer. That's the CO. You'll hear that a lot, CO. And then I'm Army, so we always said KO because we didn't want to mess that up with our company commander, who is called a CO. But for this, we're talking about contracting officer. They normally call it a CO. And this is the authority to modify and administer the contract. The contracting officer representative is the COR. This is the person who monitors performance and approves invoices. Okay. And then the contractor, the PM. Now, who is your primary point of contact for your contract? That's what they're going to that's what you need to make sure you identify and who's going to be doing that. And then the internal team delivers the performance and the reports. These are some of the things you're going to have to deal with. All right, let's keep going. Exercise 1. All right, the post award readiness checklist. And that's going to be on handout page 1. It's going to list activities your business must take before starting work. And I put just a basic example is verify period of performance and conduct internal kickoff meeting. All right, so what I did just to make sure you understood what I was saying, let's go to handout 1. This is what you're going to get at the end of this training. All right, so the post-award readiness, purpose. Before beginning performance, ensure your company is fully prepared to manage the awarded contract and maintain compliance with all requirements. Now, this is nothing that you have to do. This is just a recommendation we recommend you do. Okay, now you can do it. You don't have to do it. It's up to you, but it's just a help because you don't know what you don't know. Now, this is a living document. It's going to change as you start learning, as you win your second, your third, your fourth contract. You might be like, oh, no, I want to add this, this, and this. This is just a starting place. This is just to boom, let's get started, and then you'll keep going. Now, what is entailed in this checklist? Because I wanted to make sure you had tools to get started, hit the ground running. And some of you may have already won a contract, like I said, and you don't feel like you administered your contract the way you could have, you see? So I put in here categories what I thought. Okay, so the task, we receive a fully executed contract signed by the KO, and then you make your remarks. It's just a simple start. Okay, verify the period of performance and deliverable schedule. Always put this on your calendar. Everything goes on that calendar with notifications to remind you so you do not forget or anything slips, because that's not going to look good when you get your report card, correct? So then let me see, do I need to blow it up a little bit more? I hope y'all can see that. And we'll blow up a little bit more. Okay. So administration, then review the clauses and the modifications and key file reference. We talked about that. I showed you how to go get those file references. And I recommend you write those file references in your notes section, put links in here because it's a Word document. So that means you can add to, take away, modify. So anybody on your team is using this, they'll know where those references are. You've already made the notes so that way they can hit the ground running. All right. Your personnel. You can keep adding, just keep adding to it. All you have to do is just hit insert and then insert below and then add. So it's easy for you. And if you want something highlighted, highlight it, make it red, bold. This is up, the sky is the limit. Okay. Then you've assigned your internal contract, the manager, the project lead. All right, you conducted internal kickoff meeting with your team, and then what date you put your dates in there, or who was it, just whatever you want to put in here just to get started. All right, you're finna confirm funding availability, invoicing terms, whatever. All right, it just set up your project costs in your accounting software. That's just talking about your accounting software, your labor, materials, indirects, all that different stuff. All right, your communication, you've identified your contracting officer and your COR. You're going to put that information in here so you don't miss it, you don't lose it. This is just to get you started. All right. And then the communication. All right. Establish reporting format and submission method. All right. And I always put a reflective prompt. Okay. What's one step you often forget or delay after an award? That's where you're going to put your notes, anything of that nature, any other reflective prompts. So whoever does this portion, or if it's you doing a portion, you don't want to forget things. So what you do is you just keep adding to your sheet, because remember, this is our internal, this is an internal sheet. Not, this don't go to the KO, this don't go, this is our internal business to make sure that we're onboarding, if you will, the contract correctly, the same way every time, so you don't miss steps, you don't miss any information. And this is showing, this is because we think we remember everything when we're going through a sheet. No, you don't remember everything, because you got a million things going through your head. You got different other contracts. So it's important that you establish your standard operating procedure when you're dealing with post-award activities, if you will. We won our contract. Now what? Basically. Okay. Now, before I move on to the next slide, and then I'm going over some different, is there any questions about this handout that you're going to be receiving?
We have one question.
Mhm.
Is the post-award conference also called the kickoff meeting?
Well, yes, but they don't interchangeably call it that, the kickoff meeting, but there's different kickoff meetings, so that's why I always make sure I use the term, because you have the kickoff meet, the internal kickoff meeting that you're going to have with your team, then you have the external kickoff meeting that you're going to have with the contracting officer, then you're going to have your proposal kickoff meeting. So that's why I try to use the terms for that, whatever subject or topic, because there's so many kickoff meetings for everything. There's a kickoff meeting for the debrief. You know what I'm saying? It's just kickoff meetings for everything.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, good deal. All right, so that's good. So now, like I said, you're going to get those handouts, so you'll be good to go for handout one. This is the contract close toolkit, and we'll go over the rest of them. All right, so let's move on, because we got still a lot to cover. So we've already talked about your post award. Now was exercise one. So what I'm trying to do is continue to put the exercise in it, because I want this to be interactive. And because you don't know what you don't know, and you're very new at this, I'm thinking of questions that my small business that might have, or what I've dealt with when I was in as a counselor. But if you think of something, make sure you put it in the chat, because then I could create an exercise. And this is because this has came, I mean, it looks really good. It's coming together, because the last time we did this training last year for the contract administration. I didn't have a bunch of examples, all those the questions that I got from the class before, the attendings. It was wonderful. And because I got those questions, certain things, because sometimes as we continue to do this, we get far removed from it. So we forget the basics. We forget the beginner's guide to how to do this. And then we overcomplicate it, and it's not simple for you to understand. So the goal of this training is to make it simple, easy to understand, easy to implement. And if you felt like, oh man, I had this question, I wish it would have been answered, make sure you leave it in the chat, especially at the end, because I take those questions and then when I revise it every year, these training slides are revised every year because we might have a different scenario, or we might have a product, or we move from services. You just never know. So what I do is take those questions and then I add it to the training, and that's why the training has been getting better and better, because of you letting me know the things that was puzzling to you or you had a little confusion with. And so I thank you for you all giving me those questions, because it has definitely helped drive the training. All right, so let's see what we got next. All right, now the types of contract modification. Now that was the one I was telling you about, the FAR Part 43. So let's go there, because this is important, because you need to know when it's a bilateral that requires both parties to agree to the changes, such as scope adjustment, funding increase, anything that deals with bilateral. That's both of you having to sign. Now there's also the unilateral. That's just the contracting officer. They issued by the contracting officer for administrative changes, exercising option years, and so forth and so on. Now, they tell you in the contract if there's going to be exercising of the option year. But then some of the contracts, right, they tell you this is only for 1 year. There will not be any exercising of the contract. So definitely read your contracts to let you know if they planned on exercise, if that clause has been added, and if they planned on adding. So let's go to FAR Part 43. Okay. All right, so now we're going. So you see how I love to use this. So we'll just go to FAR Part 43. That's the contract modifications. So if you have any concerns or issues, or you don't know, is this a bilateral or is this a unilateral contract modification, then this is where you go right here to contract modifications. And then you will just look at the definitions. It's telling you everything. The administrative change means a unilateral. So then they're telling you which types go with unilateral. So you don't have to figure out. So in the exercise scenario. All right, so let me pull that up because I want you to see. So hold on, let's keep going. And then I want to show you. So like in this exercise number 2, all right, identify modification types. I gave you just 4 scenarios, just so you can write, so you'll know exactly. You just classifying each scenario, and how you classify these scenarios is from the FAR. So if it's extended a period of performance, if it's an increased funding, change of the contracting officer representative contact, or if it's adding a delivery, well, that's a scope of work. They're increasing more work for you to do. So I created that handout for you. So that's going to be on page 2, right? So you can make your notes. All right, this is where you're going to make all your notes when you get this. The contracting officer extends the period of performance by 6 months. Funding is increased to cover additional scope. The agency, and then you're going to figure out which type of modification is this. The agency changes the COR, the contracting officer contact information, and then the government adds a new deliverable. That's they wanted to add social media campaign support. Now, the key takeaway you need to remember about this is only the contracting officer can issue modifications. Verbal directions from other personnel is not binding until a written modification is signed. I've seen too many contracts that have been someone else called and said we want to do a modification, and then the contractor did the work, and now they're sending an invoice in. Now, but they got that verbally. No, it's not verbally. You need to have a signed modification. If you do not receive that signed modification, do not, because that is unauthorized. The only person authorized to issue a modification is the contracting officer. And that's why I wanted to make sure we went over this in detail in the training so you don't perform and do some work that you're not going to get paid for. Because I've seen it happen too many times. Because you figure, oh, they're a government person, they can tell me what. No, it has to be the contracting officer who is authorized to issue the modification. So if they ask you, then you need to send in writing, hey, I've been requested to do this work, and you send that to the contracting officer and you get it approved prior to doing anything. Always get everything approved prior to doing anything because you need it in writing. There is no such thing as verbal directions when you're dealing with government contracting. And this is where you'll do the research for this. Okay, so let's go back to the FAR. All right, so now let's go over the administrative changes. That's why I always make sure so you understand it. You have to put it in practice. So, because you're brand new at this, you don't know. So, right here is telling you administrative changes means a unilateral contract change in writing that does not affect the substantive rights of the parties. So change in the paying office or appropriation data, that's the funding data. All right. And then they're telling you for a solicitation amendment, change order, administrative changes. So when I did that exercise, it was to show you, okay, this is how I look up when these different scenarios happen. This is where I get that information from. All right. I'm looking up and then they're telling you if it's an issue amendment, change order, administrative change. Now, they're telling you for a supplemental agreement, the effective date shall be the date agreed upon by the contracting parties. Then for a modification, they're telling you right here, modification is issued as a confirming notice of termination for the convenience. So if they terminate your contract, the effective date of confirming notices shall be the same as the effective date of the initial notice. So this is why it's important that you understand the definitions, the policies, and then the types. And they're telling you right here, a bilateral. So that's why I said go over everything, understand what it means. And like I said, if you have questions, that's the time you put it on your counseling sheet too, because those are questions for your contract because it's different for each solicitation. So that's why I said when it's general, I'll talk about it all day long because it applies to everyone. But when it's for a specific solicitation, that is not for everyone. It's for your solicitation because it might be something different for another solicitation. Okay, so that's why I always tell you, no, it's not good that I'll stick with general when we're in our training sessions, but when you have a specific question about a specific solicitation, make sure you write those questions down and then show them the solicitation where it's at in the solicitation, so that way they can help you to identify what type of modification is and what is the criteria and what you need to do. So that's where it's at. And they're just telling you about the notice of the contract changes, all those different things in here, the availability of funds. And remember, we were talking about the contract clauses. So notice when these contract clauses, so many times we'll see all those contract clauses in the back of our contract and we don't understand what they mean. Well, this is why they're you have to go to the Federal Acquisition Regulation so you can understand what it means. It's giving you which clause number it is and then the meaning of it. All right. And then this is all the different change orders. This is the kind of form you might see. Now, with Department of State, you might not see a standard Form 30. You might just see, it depends on each one because everybody does. It's just different. I've truly seen that. Sometimes they stick to it. But when you're dealing with the state, every state does it different. Now, federal is a little bit more standardized. We're using the standard Form 30. The standard the amendment is the SF30. And then if you want to learn more about it, then you just click on that hyperlink and then it'll take you there and then you can read more about it. All right. And then the contract, they just tell you the contractor must continue performance of the contract as changed. So once you sign it, that's it. You got to go to the new changes and everything because that's a legally binding document. And that's why some of them have to be bilateral because you have to agree to the terms and conditions. or you don't want your current the contract to be terminated. So that's important for you to understand. You do not want that contract to be terminated. So it's important that you understand all of the things that it takes for this. And then what one thing I did miss when I was creating my slides, I wanted to show you how to set up those folders. And because I remember as I was going through the new series of training, I had started showing you how to set up your file folders. So what I did was I did create a folder for you just created a folder, and it said the post award contract administration, and then I put the number of the solicitation because you have to stay organized, right? So and then the documents that you need to have in there is the award documents, the post award orientation, the deliverables, the post award reporting, and then the communication log, and then the invoice and modifications. So what I wanted to do was discuss these in depth. But start talking about it because what I want to make sure that you understand the post award, just like we did with the proposal level 1, 2, 3, is you need to create folders for each phase. And for this phase, make sure you have your post award contract administration folder. And I'll go over these more in depth as we go through the slides, but I did not want to forget to make sure you understand how to create the folders, what should be in the folders, because what I didn't, because I wanted to put that at the beginning of the training and also in the exercise 1, but I see I didn't put it in here and I wanted to make sure I cover that. So I'm gonna go back to that. So I'm not gonna forget that portion, but I'm gonna do that on the second half because I want to make sure I be aware of the time too, because I don't want to run out of time and not get through the slides. Okay, before we take our first break. Okay, so what I'll do is we'll go over the performance monitoring and the quality assurance. Then once we go over this section, then we're going to take that quick 5-minute break. Then once we take the 5-minute break, I'm going to come back and talk about the post award, those folders, because I want to make sure that is in the video training so you can go back and look at that at a later date. But because and then on our hopefully next time when we give this training again, I want to definitely dive in that a little bit more because I want you to understand the importance of making sure your folders are set up, who's going to have access, because I wasn't able to go through like I did with the previous training because I want to know who have access to these folders for the post award because you don't want everybody having access to your post award. And then these are the different tabs like the performance monitoring and quality assurance. The task going to be your regular reviewing contract reports, deliverables, conducting site visits if you have to. That's only in yours. Inspections. Does your solicitation require a quality assurance program? And that's where you will get that from the contracts. So this is part of the performance reporting. So what I wanted to make sure that I'm telling you, because although we're creating the training, I did not tell you which folder each one should go in, like your award documents, your post award, because we just talked about that, the post award orientation, and then those deliverables, and where you get the deliverables from in the training before. The deliverables is right here. Remember, the deliverables is telling the contractor shall produce the following deliverables. So that's why I'm saying it's good when you can see how it all comes to place. And I try to make sure I don't miss anything because there's so many steps and it's a lot going on when you're dealing with contracting. But the good thing about it is when you continue to get these trainings, you'll see certain things. And then as you're building out your plans and your folder structures and all that, you'll learn where everything goes. And then so you see how I created a folder because the deliverables you don't want to miss. You don't want to forget about it. You want to make sure you're doing everything correctly. And so that's why I tell you, create your folders. and then restrict it to who only needs access to it. You share it. So if you wanted to just share this document with whoever's going to be helping you with the award, then you would just go in there and add that person to this document and only that person. And then if you want to make sure if it expires, or make sure once they're done, you remove that person from the award documents, whoever is helping. So if that's your virtual assistant and you need your virtual assistant to put your post award orientation documents in there, then that's what you would do. And so, like I said, once we come back from our training, I'll continue to go over each one. I'm going to go from 1 through 7 so you know exactly what goes on each folder. And then next time, I want to make sure that is incorporated in the training. But because I don't want to forget that, that's why I want to make sure we go over that, because that was not in these slides. Okay, now as we get ready, let me make sure I can see where we at before we get ready to. Okay, so we've talked about the site visits and the inspections, which will be going in there as well, in the quality assurance program. Okay, so let's see what the next slide is. Okay, that's going to be the weekly reporting and the communications. So when we get back from our 5-minute break, then we'll go over that next step. All right. So I don't want to keep going until we get back. All right. That's it. Yes,
Okay,
Mom,
well,
taking.
all
Mhm.
right, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Ready?
Okay, I wanted to recap on the performance monitoring and quality assurance. Okay, so what I wanted to make sure, that's part of the FAR part 42.302. So I wanted to make sure I covered that. So that way you'll remember when we talked about the performance monitoring quality assurance. Okay, that ensures contractor meets technical, cost, and schedule requirements. All right. Example of KPIs: deliverable on time rate, response time to corrections. So the performance monitoring and the quality assurance are essential processes in contract administration, okay? Because it ensures that the contractor meets the terms, conditions, and performance standards outlined in the contract. And that's what I wanted to make sure I pulled that out, because I want to make sure you understand that. And the key components are: number one, performance monitoring, because we're talking about that performance monitoring. That's the regularly reviewing contractor activities and deliverables to ensure compliance with the contractor's scope of work and KPIs, your key performance indicators. And that was in the contract. So let me go to that, because what I wanted to make sure y'all understood what that was at. So let me go to the contract. So remember, we talked about deliverables, and then under the deliverables, you will find the performance standards. So when you heard me say those KPIs are your performance standards, how they're going to be is telling you the requirement: the campaign reach, performance standard, at least 70% awareness among target audience, and then they're telling you the method of evaluation, and that's through the audience surveys, media analytics, so forth and so on. So that's why when you hear me say performance monitoring and the standards, this is where you're getting that information from. And then the rest is just when we're going to get to the reporting requirements. So right now we're talking about the performance standards. So that's when you hear me say that. Now, conducting inspection, audits, evaluations to track progress, identify issues early, stuff like that. So these are things that's in a normal contract. So you're gonna see this in every contract, but it's just gonna be worded differently. So if you're doing a janitorial services versus this is a media, this is all about for a media company or some forth. So just going to be totally different. So that's why I said it's according to the requirement, the solicitation document, because their evaluation criteria will be different. And they're telling you how they're going to monitor and evaluation reports, monthly progress reports, detailing reach, engagement, media performance. They're telling you, so you don't have to figure it out. It's telling you everything you need to know. You just got to go pull it out, the information, pull it out, put it in the correct documentation and where it needs to go. Okay, so that's when you hear me say that. That way you know exactly where it is. All right, so that we don't forget, in the interest of time, because I want to make sure get all this covered, the award information. So we talked about that performance because you need to know where all these different documents are going when you're dealing with the award. Okay, so number one, the award document. If you want to take notes on this, because I just wanted to make sure you understood what goes in each folder. Now, the award document, this is the official contract file, post award only. Remember, we're only talking about post award. This basically, you'll have your award letter, the signed contract, your pricing, your scope of work or statement of work, your deliverables, because this is where you're just keeping everything. But remember, we got our own deliverables folder. That's the information that you're going to be sending out, basically. Okay, so you got two deliverables, one for your award. That's just so you know what deliverables you have, or you could put your templates in there if you want. However you want to do your structure. It's just a recommendation, and making sure you have all your attachments, and then any post award clarifications or questions or anything of that nature. This is all part of record keeping. Okay. And that's where I wanted to make sure that I talked about in the record keeping. So let me pull it back up so you'll see what I mean. Okay. Because I want to keep with the slides. This is the reporting and communication. And then just telling you what the week reports, progress, and any issues, monthly reports, deliverables, summary, regular meetings with the contracting officer. I don't know what your regular meetings is. That's why I do want to establish that in the beginning. And if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So let's because I want to get back to the we're going to do the post award, and I'm going to put that with the award documentation, everyone, because that's going to be under the record keeping. This is where it's supposed to be, the record keeping. I wanted to make sure you had the record keeping and I didn't miss this part. So now this is going to be the handout number 2, contractor post award plan. Because I don't want to, like I said, in the subject of time, I got to stay on the slides. Now that's going to be the next handout you're going to get, the contract post award plan template. All it is a template. As you can see, you can edit it, you can take stuff away, you can duplicate it. So you will save this one, files. This is your template. So you never change the template. You will file, save it, and put the first contract. So that contract title, number, period of performance, prime or sub, and then the agency. All right, then you're just going through. Let me make it bigger. Okay. Personnel, so if it was a key personnel program manager who oversees the execution and communication, was there a technical lead, whatever the contract required. That's what the key personnel is talking about, the key personnel roles identified. Do you have a QA, the quality assurance lead, who conducts the quality checks, admin who handles the invoicing, or if you have a subcontractor on this, who is managing the subcontractor. These are what you identify. And you use this sheet every time when you're dealing with a new contract. So that's why we always try to give you these templates and stuff so you'll have something to get started with. And then you can start brainstorming, okay, well, I do need this and I don't need that. If you don't need it, delete it, take it away. But do not take it away from your template, because it may come in another opportunity. It may be on there for another opportunity. You might have to put that information in there. Okay. So that's why I said, do not edit your template. And then that's basically your standard operating procedure. So you definitely need to create that, your standard operation, how you use this template. Okay. When you first get a post award, this is the first thing you do. The second thing you do, the third thing you do. It's however you want to set it up. Then I put in here your government POC. So you already know the government POCs, and then your technical monitor. That COR is the one who technically, that's your technical monitor, who is the primary day-to-day contact. They the eyes and ears of the government contracting officer. That's what they do. They do everything for the contracting office because they have a lot of things going on. All right, now the kickoff strategy, the internal kickoff. Remember, we were talking about that kickoff because everybody uses it so for everything. That's why I always use, okay, what contract administration kickoff. That's the external one, the internal one. You see what I'm saying? You see how I broke it out for you so you know which one. Before we meet with the government, let's go over some things. All right. We want to be prepared. We don't, we all want to be speaking the same sheet of music, on the same sheet of music and speaking the same things. And you don't want your contractor saying something different than you. So that's why I say for the internal, you will put because internal, that's the contractor manages. So I want to make sure I'm clear on that. This is the kickoff strategy internal. That's you, the contractor. That's your kickoff. And then making sure you have staff and assignments, timekeeping, QA checks, and stuff. And I should have added all that on there because as I think of things, I always try to add it to the training for you so that way we don't miss anything. The budget and burn rate, team meetings, subcontract it's whatever you want to put in your meeting. It's whatever you need, and then risks. Always think about any risks that could get happen with this contract that could cancel it. Now that you've had your kickoff meeting, now we're going to have our external because you want to have it prior to your post award orientation with the government. Okay, so I guess I could have put on here contractor and then government so you know the difference, internal, external. It's the difference, but I just want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. External, that is the government contracting. When you deal with them, confirm your point of context, review your deliverables, expectations, clarify reportings so you know what the cadence is, and then confirm templates. Do they require you to use their templates or can you create your own? And then acceptance criteria. You want to make sure all of that. And then who you're reporting to, the contracting office, or what's the procedure when they change the contracting officer, because sometimes people leave, people come to new organizations, they change your contracting officer. And then when you have to check in for the meetings, do you have to assign an attendance roster so to make sure that you were there? Then make sure you get real good understanding about those deliverables and how they want to receive those deliverables. Because sometimes they don't always put everything in the contract in the beginning because it's just the solicitation document. But that contract award, you want to make sure everything's in there because that's what you're going to be held to. That's the standard. All right, that's what you're going to be held to. And then responding to inquiries, how long do they normally take? 24, 48 hours and different things of that nature. Those are some of the things. These are just things that I kept thinking about as I was going through. So that's why I always make sure I just keep putting notes, and because this is a Word document, you just keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. And then for the deliverables, you'll have a section for the deliverables and performance tracking. Do you have a log? How are you going to track your deliverables when you send them over to the agency? Are you going to have that master log to track? And then if you do, make sure you have the deliverable name. So if you got two documents, you got to send, make sure you put the correct name, the due date. Are you going to send a PDF? Are you sending a Word document? Are make sure that format is how they requested it, because sometimes it'll tell you. So let's go back to the solicitation, and they'll tell you how they want to receive it. They'll tell you if it's let's see if they got the in here, because sometimes, well, federal, they always have it in there most of the times. This one is saying, oh, they want, that's the surveys, reports, okay, in PDF reviews. So they're just maybe telling you, sometimes they'll say they want only PDFs or Word document, but I always recommend you put it in the PDF unless they ask for a Word document, because it's going to mess up the formatting and all your, when you put it in there, and then, when you send it off, it start messing up with your format and everything. So I recommend PDFs. So you just have to and if they don't, that's why it's time to have those meetings so you can discuss with them how they prefer the format. And that's some of the things you want to bring up in the meeting. Is PDFs okay? Do I have to send an Excel spreadsheet? Or, is it have to be a Microsoft document, and so forth and so on. So you definitely want to have those discussions to make sure, because sometimes it doesn't say. And then we talked about the communication plan, how you continue. Do they want you to have a weekly meeting? When I was performing on we had to have a weekly meeting every week. We were meeting, and I was the subcontractor. So I'm the one in the meeting. So you just never know, because you might be the subject matter expert on that contract. So you have to attend the meetings. But if you happen to attend the meetings, you already know you're going to have to take notes and update the prime contractor on how the meeting, who attended the meeting, what, the who, what, where, and why. All those different things that you're going to have to discuss in that meeting. So that's one thing you definitely want to make sure you are having a format. So I always say if you're doing internal communication plan, then you probably want to create a deliverable for that too. It's however the prime contractor wants to do it, or if the prime contractor leaves it up to the subcontractor. Hey, just send me this update so that way I know what happened in the meeting. Is everything going okay? Should things, and then as the prime contractor, your role is to verify everything, because how about you have a poor subcontractor not providing that information, so you're missing deliverables or you didn't get the information passed up. It's just the checks and balances to keep everybody honest and informed, and that way you continue to win contracts. So it's a lot of things you have to think about when you're the prime contractor. It's a lot of things, and I'm telling you, and I've tried to cover as much as possible in this training. But like I said, that's why we continue to have this training, to refine it, to make sure we're and then if we have I could create LinkedIn content, YouTube content, so that way if I didn't cover something in this training session, then I'll do a just for that specific topic in another format, just something easy like 10 or 15 minutes, and not the long training. So that's why we do this. Okay, then it's talking about the external communication, talking to this meeting cadence, you just keep up with all that. And then the quality assurance if they require one. But internal, you should have a internal quality assurance program always, because you need to know how are you going to evaluate, monitor your contracts, making sure the statement of work requirements, doing all those different things. So you definitely have to have that. And then just documentation, file management, how are you managing those things of that nature? And I just put a whole lot of stuff on here. So that's why I want to make sure you just cover it. And if it doesn't apply, delete it. But it will apply eventually. It just may not apply for this contract, but this is just best practices. And then we're going to go into the invoicing and payment process, and then just thinking about the risks and everything. So you will get this handout right here as well. So that's why I want to make sure if there's any questions about this handout before I move on with the slides.
Okay, let's have a look here and see if we have any questions there. Oh, can an email serve as an administrative change, or is a contract modification needed?
Most definitely. Just because they send you an email, well, if they sent that email, then they could have sent that modification with it. Because how about you get an email from the contracting specialist, not the contracting officer, with the modification? Because it depends on the email. If it might require, now if it's a unilateral, then an email with the modification will be enclosed. But if it's just an email, then you respond back and let them know, hey, thank you, I received this. However, I did not see the modification or the amendment, or whatever word you want to use. But as long as we get the documentation in writing proving, because it has to be in writing. An email, yes, but it needs to be on a standard form. And if there's no standard form, because you're going to need something to prove when you submit your invoicing, because that will go with your invoicing, correct? So that's why I say, yes, an email is fine, but is there an attachment with it? It should be a modification document modifying the contract, because that's what you're going to keep in your contract file. Oh, you told me to do this, and here's the document to prove it. But if you don't have a document to prove it, and then who did it come from? You see what I'm saying? So that's why I said, no, I don't just deal with email. I want an official document saying that the contracting officer has approved this. And then once invoicing, when I go submit my invoicing, I can get paid. So it depends on the type of email. And if it's coming from a contracting officer, then they're gonna send the modification, because they know that they have to do it in writing saying it's a modification, because that's either SF30, it depends on which form it is they're using.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope you answer that one. But yes, you want to get if they just send a regular email saying, and then is it a notice to proceed and different what type of, okay, so is this a scope change? So yeah, I'm really cautious when they just send emails out because I'm looking at subject lines. What are you asking? Is this changing the scope of work? Because that means more money. They're adding a service on here. So then that's a bilateral. That means you have to sign saying that you acknowledge this change and that you can perform this. So yeah, I would be all day on that one. But okay, the next one. Do we have any more questions?
No, that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. All right. So let's go back to the slides. All right. So then we were talking about, but also, like I said, because I wanted to talk about the record keeping and then the folder. So let me go back to the slide. I mean, the document folder. Okay, so like I said, you want your, these are the minimum folders I recommend you have. You don't have to, but I just recommend because you got to keep up with your communication log, your invoicing, the modifications, your performance, the deliverables, the post award orientation, and your award. So these are the minimum you should have in your record keeping. And then as we were going over, I'm going to go over real quickly for the award. Make sure that award letter in there, the signed contract, pricing, statement of work or scope of work, deliverables, attachment, and any post-award clarifications. Now, what should be in your post-award orientation? All you storing in there is your kickoff and orientation materials, right? So your VA can have access to that upload, or your BD specialist, whoever you have doing this, whichever team member, put your kickoff agenda, notes that you want to ask, because remember we talked about that in the contract on that handout. Questions you submitted to the KO or COR, your point of contact, just communications, because that's basically everything that you're going to have for that meeting. You want to have it in there. All right. Then number 3, deliverables. You know what I told you about that? Everything related to the deliverables. And then you could put just drafts and final approval, however you want to do that, because you will have drafts as you create, and then your final approved deliverables. So those are the 2 folders you at least should have in the deliverables folder. Okay. That's so if you was working on a messaging campaign work plan, and then you put that needs to go in the drafts. Make sure you put drafts in there so you know that's the draft copy. And then once it's final, you put that final PDF, boom, send it off, and it needs to be in the folder for final, so you'll know what was sent off and what wasn't. Okay, what did I send off? What did I not send off? Because you want to track all those things. And then in your performance reporting, right? That's going to be either whatever they told you. What was the performance reporting? And you're going to get that from the solicitation, the performance reporting. And I believe they told you if it was weekly, bi-weekly. Let me make sure I go back in here. Let me see the objectives. I think they put it in this one. But here it is. You see it right there, reporting requirements. They're telling you bi-weekly progress report. They told you a short narrative, the data report on campaign reach, entitlement, delivery, final report. That's the summary of all deliverables. They told you do within 15 days of campaign. This is where you're going to get the reporting requirements. And then you go from there. Okay, so we got the reporting requirements, and then your meeting notes. So if you have any meeting notes, progress summary, any matrices, Q&A questions, issues, reports, just keep up with those things. The only thing is I want you to just make sure you're keeping a track of everything, because you want to win another contract. And this is going to ensure, because you're catching yourself, you're doing your checks and balances, and you're making sure you have everything. And then in your communications log, that just capture your intentions with the COR. That's your email. I always email PDF my stuff. So as soon as, because you want to have the VA or all whoever on the team, they won't have your emails. So when you send out an email, you can PDF it and put it in the email log if you want them privy to that email and you need them to reply to something or something like that, then you will want to email PDF that email correspondence. If you want to put your call summaries, meeting notes, questions submitted, government answers, requests for technical direction, anything that you want to put in here that you don't mind sharing with the team. So that's up to you how you share with your team. And then your invoicing, remember that's the invoice. Now you want to do an invoice log. All right. create your little log so that way you know when I submitted the invoices or whatever, was it accepted? And then if not, because you want to keep those checks and balances, those just it's just tracking everything. And I always recommend you have that log, because then you can just go in there and see, oh dog, we didn't invoice for deliverable 7 or whatever. And then your modifications, that's where you're going to put all of your different mods. So if there's a mod 1, 2, amendments, everything's going in there. Anything they change, you keep it in your modification. That way you know there was a change. And then if you want to create a folder for your contract closeout, when you close the contract out, then you can create another folder. All you have to do is just hit create a new folder, and then put that contract closeout if you want. So we will do, this one will be number 8, because I always want to make, that's going to be number 8. And then you just put contract closeout, and however you have your setup. And then we're going to do contract closeout. So that way you have a folder for that as well. So when you close it out, you'll know that this folder was closed out. Boom. And that, so then I recommend 8, because I want to definitely capture my contract closeout. So 8 folders when you're dealing with the post award. I believe that, and that's where you're going to put your final deliverables, your final invoice, your final accepting emails, any lesson learned, any other documents that need to go into that folder. So that's where you will keep everything in here. So that's the end of that. Okay. All right, so that was the contract post award plan, and that was the record keeping. I just wanted to go a little bit more in detail on the record keeping, and I wish I would have added that, had a slide or anything of that nature. That's why I just went with it. You can watch the slide and just take time, pause, write your notes, and you'll have that information for that, for the record keeping. All right, we talked about the documentation and record keeping in detail. All right, maintain the copies, all modifications, all the deliverables and correspondence, and then your invoicing. So now, how I recommend you set up for your invoicing and payments is, however, because first of all, you're going to have to um, make sure you go and check on the solicitation what is the submission for the invoice instructions. All right, the contractor shall submit an invoice after each, and this was what we identified in the training before. They used the template, and probably just didn't change the preventive maintenance service. And had you attend the pre-bid conference, you would have identified that with the contracting professional. But however, since we did not attend that, we could not ask the question, was that an error? Which we already know was an error, because they were using language from a different previous contract. But nevertheless, because we understand, they're still telling us that we have to submit, upload in the My ILMS online platform. So that means you're going to need to register. So then that would be on one of your to-do lists, because you won this contract. Now you're going to need to invoice. And they already told you the contractor should expect payment 30 days after completion of service, or 30 days after receipt of the electronic invoice. And they told you at the payment office, and which is later invoice submit directly to. So the invoice will have to be submitted. Now, what needs to be on the invoice? Okay, make sure what I do is I will take this exact sheet right here and create my own invoice using the items, because you want to make sure you have the CLIN. All right, this is the CLIN item number right here, 001. And then this is for the campaign strategy and work plan. So if that's the one, the description, the type of service, the number, the price, and everything, that's going to be on that invoice. And then the rest of the different information that needs to be on there. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slideshow. So we verify the CLINs match the contract schedule. Include the description, quantity, unit. I include everything, because I don't want them to contract number, the name, which contract, because everyone is submitting their documentation, and you want to make sure as soon as they get this documentation that it is approved, and that it doesn't have any discrepancy. So I take the exact document, include everything on there. They're telling you that it has to be submitted electronically through their invoice processing platform, and then attach the acceptance form. And that's normally for products and services. But if they have some kind of acceptance form that you would use, well, that one is mostly for the products, because that's letting them know that I received my laptop, my printer, or deliverable. Except it depends on whatever the solicitation is. So I won't say that because I don't want to confuse anyone. But it's dependent on the solicitation. Okay, and then when you're creating an invoice, so we already know we got to include all of this information, and then make sure you put the contract name, title, all those different things, your point of contact information, all of that point of contact information, because that's going to be necessary for them when they're looking up to verify signature or anything of that nature. Because I don't know if they're gonna, I can't remember if it was that they had, yeah, because I believe you did have to sign it. Yes, you did have to sign your invoice and everything, because they're going to verify everything. That's because they want to make sure you're authorized to do the invoicing. So if you have someone else doing your invoicing, make sure they're on file. They have an authorized, they can authorize, but normally they want the business owner to sign for that invoice, to invoice for that opportunity. Okay. Okay, so that's the invoicing and payments. Now, the contract closeout procedures. All right, so once you have completed the contract and all that, that's when the contract closeout procedures come in place. And also, you will go to the federal acquisition regulation for the contract closeout files. Now, what you're confirming is, these are just the steps: confirm all deliverables have been received. All right, because this is the proper contract closing. And this is so that the contracting officer can close out your file. And that way, but you want to make sure it gets closed out so nothing's open or outstanding. Then once you submit that final invoice, they might have you sign that release for claims, so that way you don't, they're letting them know that we don't owe you anything, you have paid, everything's good. So that way when the person who is closing out the contract, they can close it out without any issues. And so that final contract closeout is for, so what I did is I did a handout for that one as well, so that way you could see. So let me go to the next slide and see. Okay, yeah, that was handout on the page 4, the contract closeout readiness checklist. So let me go to that one. Okay, so that should be on handout number 1. Okay. Contract closing checklist. Okay. So, like I said, all of these are just best practices. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do any of this. This is just to make sure that you set up your standard operating procedures. You set up things in a way that will help you um when you're dealing with, because this is the first contract, but then you win your second and your third, so you got to make sure you're managing all of that and that you don't miss any of the steps when you're dealing with the contract closeouts. So what you normally, what you're going to put in there is all required deliverables, then you're going to put your notes, right? The invoicing, okay, final invoice submitted and approved. So basically all you're doing is documenting, because this is the document you're going to put in a file to make sure you've closed out every opportunity. Remember, this is going in the contract closeout. So in the document on the folder, we correct that one is going here. So like I said, all your invoices went in here, any modification, but your closeout is here, because then you know you've closed this out, and then you can file these documents away however you manage your contracts. So how, because you need to have it on file, because you know those retention or the records keeping, some of them, what, 7 years, 10 years, 3 years, whatever, how long you have to keep these on file. So if you get audited or something of that nature, you want to definitely have everything organized, so when they have to do their part and do the checks and back, you'll have everything and you're not looking for anything. So let's go back to the exercise. All right, so then you got all that in there. So property, were you given a laptop? So normally when you get a contract, sometimes you're given a badge your CAC, your where you're gonna use that to get into the building or get into the laptop or something like that. You might have that and a laptop. So those are the normal. Or if you are whatever, if they gave you a monitor, keyboards, and all that stuff, did you ship it all back in, or did you walk it in because you were in person? Because when we were doing the remote, then you are able to just ship everything in. But now that we're all going back to the office, you may not have to return any furnished property, but you want to make sure your hand receipt is cleared. So if you signed a hand receipt for a CAT card and a laptop, then you need to make sure you go to the place and clear that, because they'll say you did not turn in that government furnished equipment. So we definitely want to make sure that is turned in, and get some documentation, some turned in documentation saying that yes, I did turn this in. Uh, the CAT card and the laptop, or whatever equipment, monitors, whatever you received. Now, the modifications, you need to make sure you have all of that. The final report, performance report, and then any lessons learned. If you're the prime contractor, I guess I should have put in here the CPARS as well, the contract performance assessment report, because you do want to have a copy of that as well once you complete, to see what you did. Was you very good? Was you exceptional? And what did they grade you on, and how? Because you can use that when you go after a new contract, and you'll have that information for you. Now, so we've done that. Now, where final reflection is, what improvements will you make to the contract management process for the next award? So what do you think you could have did better, or not so good, or anything of that nature for the next time? You understand? Because you always thinking about, how can I do better? How can I get faster? What did I miss? Should I have added this? And so forth and so on. So that's some of the questions you definitely want to ask. Okay. And prepare for counseling session. Okay, so what to do before the meeting. Okay, reflect and prepare. Okay, so what challenges did you face? This is always what I'm asking. What challenges did you face? And what tools helped me? And then how will I leverage this experience, when you get into your session? These are some of the things to reflect on, and you can add anything else in here that you would like, but I always just make sure I put this in here just so you know that each of these training is meant to prepare you for your counseling session. And then, so that way when you get in your counseling sessions, you hit the ground running. Because I always say, winning a contract is not just the beginning. Managing ensures you win again and again and again. And that's the importance of this training. Okay. Oh, look, I think I went a little too fast, y'all, today. I got a little bit, got a lot done today. Okay, so more training to help you grow. So December the 11th, we got how to navigate contracting in the defense industry base. That's just one of the names we call everything. We have to call everything a name. So basically, that's going to be our next training class. And then, so we on questions now. So I finished a little bit quick today, y'all, because I had revamped these slides so many times, and I hope that they were helpful to you, and then, like I said, anything that you see that needs to be added to this training, please let me know. I planned on making a couple of edits to this training as well, because I want to make sure we add in those file record keeping, helping you with setting up your folder structure, helping you with different things of that nature. And I just keep learning that from all these different trainings every time we give this training. But like I said, if anything you thought about that I did not cover, because like I said, you don't know what you don't know. But as I continue to give these trainings, that way I can add so much more value to you, and make sure when you leave here, you have a solid foundation and you just ready to hit the ground running. Okay, Yasmin. So I open up for questions. I don't know if I'm gonna have many with this one.
All right, thank you, Akeisha. That was a great
Mhm.
presentation as always. So yes, now's your opportunity to ask Akeisha your questions by typing them in the chat box, or if there's anything you would like to her for her to go over again that perhaps you missed earlier on. And
Yeah.
while we're waiting for those, I'm going to post some links in the chat that will help you on your contracting journey. We have a lot of resources on our website. We have a roadmap, lots of information there. And obviously, you can reach out to your Apex counselor to set up a session. Okay, we have our first question. For best practices that we discussed today, do they the best practices discussed today, do they differ when communicating with the prime as a subcontractor?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I mean, although there are a lot of the clauses that flow down to the subcontractor, it's not as tedious as it is for the prime contractor, because you're going to only be held to what's in your subcontract. So when you sign that NDA and then in that teaming agreement, it tells you exactly what you're going to be held responsible for. But say for instance that you were the person as the subject matter expert for that media campaign, so you were just doing that portion of the media campaign. Well, then they're going to tie you to only your portion. So if it was only task 1 and task 2, then you're only focusing on task. See, you're just not, the only difference with the subcontract is you don't have the overall. Your contract is only that little portion that they um I'm trying to say how to say it. That little, the subcontracting agreement. So in that subcontracting agreement, you'll read your clauses, you read, because it's only certain things that flow down to the subcontractor, but the prime contractors are held completely responsible. So it's going to be different. It's going to be different. It, to me, it's better because it's not so overwhelming for you when you're first getting started as a new small business owner, because you're learning a little bit at a time. And because the prime contractor don't want you to fail because you're part of their team, most of them make sure that you get the information you need so you can perform your job, because they know if you get a bad, they get it bad, that bad report card, and it's not good for everyone. So I hope I answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions, so I'd like to thank Akeisha for a great presentation and for all of you for participating today. And we hope to see you at next month's class. Take care,
Okay.
everybody. All
Take
right.
care of you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.